Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for October 2nd. This is a continuation of the meeting from October 1st. If you are able, will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Sheriff, will you lead us this morning?
Pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Clerk, do you want to read in the closed session?
Item 1 on today's agenda is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. This item remains open.
We're just going to leave that open. We may have some items to go into later on today, so we'll just move on to the continuation of item 2. Excuse me. We are working. Yes. So since we've already read all these, we will. Yesterday we concluded our work on. We completed 040. We are on 1795050. Does that work?
The DA had brought up, the District Attorney's Office had brought up a desire for some wording change. Has that been completed?
Yeah, we're fine. Yes, we're fine with the suggestion that we strike the second sentence of 020R, the definition of commercial.
O20R?
Can you walk us, take us through that?
Let's see, I'll get back to that.
What number?
R.
The one that applies to a Macrosa.
Okay. So what do we strike? What do we change?
So the DA is recommending that we strike everything from this point here, commercial down through all of that.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
That is that's our recommendation, yes.
And why?
Because the collective and cooperative model, well, one, we believe it ended in January of this year. And two, if we include it, if it still exists, it would require extensive modifications to the rest of the ordinance. We can't simply classify those as commercial and get around all of the other changes that would need to be done to the entire framework. It's really a different model. It isn't a commercial activity, almost by its definition. It's intended to be not-for-profit. And so we just think it's unworkable, and the implication by including it in there is basically that it is still available when we do not believe that to be the case.
Is it okay if it's not for profit? Because collectives and cooperatives, you're saying, are not for profit, so
Correct.
They can exist?
Well, there's not a clear answer on whether or not the intent of the new regulations was to essentially eliminate the collective and cooperative. And, that was supposed to occur 1 year after the permit was issued and everything. But there is, while I think some consensus that has occurred, it's not universal, which I think is why the reason that it was initially recommended to be included. But if the county were to want to allow collective and cooperative cannabis cultivation, it would basically require either extensive modification to this ordinance in order to comply with that framework of regulation, or another ordinance. And we think that including it in this basically implies that it could somehow be accomplished under this ordinance, and we don't think it can.
You're
Do you
in
agree?
agreement with that?
I don't share the same concerns that Mr. Stone shares, but given the fact that the purpose of including it was to ease enforcement, as somebody who's going to be assisting with, if he's more comfortable that way, as if the enforcement officials are more comfortable this way, that's fine from my perspective. We were making it very clear that people who deem themselves cooperatives would not be able to use that excuse to say that they're not commercial. That was the reason this was put in there, to say you're all commercial to the extent that that definition still is live. I agree with Mr. Stone that the way the state law is written, the deadline with which that defense could arguably be raised is a moving target. But if Mr. Stone and the sheriff are more comfortable or feel that the inclusion of that language is some sort of hint that we're really trying to allow cooperatives and collectives to grow, if that's the interpretation and they're uncomfortable, I think it's really just a policy call. I think we share the same intent, which is to make sure that nobody gets away without having a permit simply because they claim they're not commercial. That's really the purpose of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Chief?
let me do a quick poll. Is everybody okay with the changes proposed?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Stone. Anything else for the good of the order before we start on 050? Peter?
There were two other definitions that we had included in the errata based on changes that the Planning Commission had made, adding to this list of sensitive uses, school bus stops, churches, and libraries. I don't know if you want to have the discussion about that change first before we add definitions, but we do have two definitions for churches and bus stops that if that stays in the ordinance, then we would definitely need to define those, and we have in the errata definitions that we prepared for that. So I don't know if you want to table that until we come back.
I'd like to keep things in order.
Okay,
So
well,
we'll get to that
that would
item.
be in this section, that's why I'm
Right,
bringing
but
it down.
if that stays, we'll put that in, but
Okay,
if it's all right.
yeah.
Anything else? All right, let's dig into 050. Let's start. Anything you'd like to change? A, B. I have a question on B. B1. Why do we not have, we have a type 11 and type 13, but not type 12? Interesting.
I don't remember what type 12 is. I don't have the list in front of me.
A micro business?
There was our recollection from the direction from the study session that the majority of the board did not want to include microbusiness.
Okay. I'm not overly familiar. I was hoping that the planning commission had discussed it, so I would know.
There was no further discussion on it.
And then when I went to the CDFA website, it had 11 and 12, 11 and 13 on one page, and I wondered why 13, but it was on the next page. And I just want to make sure it wasn't an oversight,
No.
or whether there was an intention to it.
I mean, when this was written, I know that I went through the different license types and thought about what made sense. At this point, I don't even remember the whole rationale behind not including 12, other than I thought it was the direction that I had. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody have any further information?
I'd like to include it.
I think I'd like to better understand what it is too, but we could, give us some research I can do at lunch.
Also, on B1 and 2, it's not a temporary license, isn't it a provisional?
Again, I mean, I don't remember what was when this, we took pieces of this from prior versions. I honestly did not go back through all of that to explain I didn't know that these were going to come up. So I personally didn't go back and research all of the bases for everything.
Well, I thought because the state is calling them now provisional licenses, not temporary.
I'm not sure. Mr. Turner might be more up on this. I don't know if he's here.
If I may, CDFA and BCC are two different entities, and one does distribution and one does commercial cultivation. So I believe the distribution licenses, off the top of my head, do not reside within CDFA, and I believe at the same time that I believe that Marita is correct in the sense that no temporary license are being distributed now. It's in lieu of a annual, it is a provisional. So, I mean, it's simple to fix it as, temporary or provisional license.
I don't think there's harm in saying or provisional.
That way it's inclusive of everything, and that way it gives a clear path to what I believe she's working for.
Okay, so is that a suggestion? Would you like to change that term?
Yes.
So the suggestion, so I'll pull the board, changing license or similar temporary or provisional license pursuant to, is that what you have in mind?
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
Very well. Supervisor Toffenelli?
Sure, yeah.
Supervisor Stopper?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes. So if you'll please include that. Just to close up my type 12, I'll research that at lunch, and if I learn something else, I'll bring it back. Otherwise, we'll continue forward.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd like to bring back after lunch also that we discussed yesterday that will need to be revisited, and I'm sure there's a few things as we go into deeper that we'll need to go back to.
We'll reveal themselves. Okay, so number C, so letter C. We're down at letter C. Anybody have any changes?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make it clear, or so I understand. There's no permit required for growing the 6 plants outdoors.
That's correct.
So it's just, we have no provision to find out who's growing, what's growing, where it's grown at, any area that it's grown, whether it conforms to 150-foot setback or not.
We would respond if we...
Per code, if somebody...
Per code, yeah.
I just want to make that clear.
What we found, even though we require a permit now for indoor cultivation, I think we've received 2 permits. I did some research with other counties and other cities. Those that have a permit found a similar non-compliance. People just didn't bother applying for the permit. It just takes more time than it would be worth to process it.
Burdensome?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yes. Did you want to?
no, go ahead, Dennis.
Referring to the California Public Health website, and this is basically SB 94. There's a whole lot of California Health and Safety Code references on this as well. Under California law, adults 21 and older can use, carry, and grow. It says buying without a valid physician's recommendation or a county-issued medical marijuana identification card will become legal for adults 21 and older on January 1st, 2018. So that means that if you are to buy medical cannabis, you must be 18 or older or have a valid physician's recommendation. Somewhere in here, we've got the 18 years and older in C, but we don't specifically follow the California law regarding the 21-year-old statement. So this is SB 94. I'm referencing California Health and Safety Code 11362 on that.
See right at the beginning, first sentence, the non-commercial cultivation of non-medical cannabis by a person aged 21 or older, or non-commercial cultivation of medical cannabis by a person age
18.
this,
18 or older. It's referenced,
but this particular statement doesn't define what you call non-commercial cultivation. This statement doesn't define non-commercial
We
cultivation.
have a definition in the definition section
That
to
refers to it.
differentiate commercial from non-commercial.
I just want to be sure that we're not falling into a trap on that 18-year-old.
I mean, I think that it's written in accordance with current state law. We define commercial and non-commercial to refer to state law. So I'm not concerned that it's illegal, but I'm certainly open to.
I can make a recommendation because I kind of hear what he's saying, if you don't mind, sir.
That's correct.
Insertion after age 18 years or older with a valid medical card.
I would buy that.
And that would address exactly what he's talking about.
Exactly. I just need to have some
It's the
clarity.
state law and it,
Yeah, just some clarity in there that
regardless.
we're going to follow state law regarding the identification card.
What if we said age 18 years or older in compliance with state law? Because I think there's the issue of the card versus there was another basis besides a valid identification.
Physician's recommendation is the other one.
So would it be adequate to just say in compliance with state law?
And leave it to the individual to determine whether they are.
Well,
No,
I mean, law enforcement could determine whether they are, if they're required. We're not allowed to preempt state
No.
law requirements anyway. So presumably, if law enforcement were looking to see whether or not they had a valid card, they would be able to have whatever indicia is required by the state would be required to be, they would have to have possession of it.
Yeah, I would accept in compliance with state law, just so that there's some clarity there.
Thank you, Julie.
Is that what you're like, Paul, on?
Yeah.
Okay, change it 18 years or older in compliance with state law. Supervisor Toffenali?
Yes.
Supervisor Stauber?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor
Yes.
Callaway? Supervisor Garamendi, yes.
I just wanted, and thank you for this poll, but I did want to clarify, after the comma, it already says, provided that such cultivation complies with state law and with all of the following requirements. So it would seem redundant to add that and then right after the comma, say it again.
Yes.
So I just wanted to point that out.
She's good.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just concerned that we very clearly identify that there are different decision points on 18 and older to between 18 and 21. And how does that state to where that clarity exists?
Supervisor Mills, you've already got the poll. We can
Yeah.
keep it if you want. Council Megan has a very
Don't
good
be
valid
so
point that I would
redundant.
agree with, but
We're stating it twice.
I don't know
Stating
if
it twice.
it's germane.
I agree with her.
Say
It's
it twice?
redundant.
We
It's
can
redundant.
be redundant once.
Okay. I also just wanted to, I have an answer for you on the micro business. I just looked it up. I think with the micro business, what I'm just trying to refresh
This is
my
the 12th?
recollection.
Yes.
Yeah. You can't get a micro business license unless the state had, when we first were looking at micro businesses, we thought that even if we disallowed one of the things that can be done with a micro business, such as manufacturing, you could still issue a license and then we could locally prevent one of the activities. Well, now the state is saying that you can't get a micro business license unless you are able to do at least 3 of the 4 activities allowed under the license, and because locally we don't allow either manufacturing or distribution, they can't use a micro business in this county, and that's the reason why it wasn't included. So the board would have to allow an entirely different cannabis activity in order for that license to be useful locally.
Okay.
And maybe we will at some point in time.
And then we can amend 1795 to change that.
Okay, thank you. So let's continue on with non-commercial cannabis cultivation. The items on number 1,
Number 2.
number 2.
This is another one of those, how are we going to start enforcing it? At the 150 feet, under our R1, et cetera, since many of the grows for non-commercial are on these zone properties. And, I mean, probably all of us know people that are growing, whether it's 1, 2, or up to 6 plants in neighborhoods, in their backyards or on their decks in townhouses or subdivisions. I don't know how we're going to start enforcing this, and since they already are being grown, and so I think we should we should reduce it to the 75.
So your proposal is to,
Take the 100 and go back, just leave it at 75 total.
okay, so basically cut out the red line part, the addition.
Oh, I don't have your copy.
Okay.
That was an addition that the Planning Commission had made in order to address concerns about
Right.
odor to neighboring properties. where
Yeah,
it's
but
higher-
the
higher
difference between 75 and 150 is not going, the reality is that they're out there. And
With-
most of the people I've met that are in smaller confined spaces there's no way they could do 150 feet. And,
But with the
and I don't know
75-foot
how
set-
we're going to how we'd manage that.
With the 75-foot setback, you'd essentially need about a half an acre to meet that setback on all 4 sides. With 150 feet, you need about 2 acres
Yeah.
to meet that setback.
And that's not happening. I mean, the reality is it's not happening. It might make us feel good to put it in there, but the reality is out there. It isn't happening. So, I mean,
Chair, I have a comment.
So Supervisor Mills?
Yes, I'd like to be sure that we try to have some consistency, even with our new general plan update, is that when we're talking about a subdivision or a proposed project that borders agricultural land, what is the setback requirement in that situation?
I believe there's a policy that requires about a 500-foot setback to protect the agricultural operation.
To protect the in other words, what we're saying here is that can't we have some uniformity in how we're looking at these setbacks? If we're going to say, for instance, that you are a residential zone property that's going to abut a ag property, your setbacks are this, but here all of a sudden we're just kind of throwing that out.
Yeah. Well, and this is, that measure in the general plan was a mitigation measure for creating conflicts and impacts to agricultural land. It was intended to protect the residences from agriculture. It was intended to protect agriculture from incompatible uses nearby. And so when discretionary development were to occur next to ag land, it would need to be designed so that this buffer can be created either through an open space parcel or greater setbacks established in larger lots along the adjoining agricultural land.
But here what we're talking about is protecting adjacent parcels from a specific type of use.
Right. And this is strictly a policy call as to, how much of a setback you feel is appropriate. Here, the commission felt that growing cannabis for personal use in or next to residentially zoned property should have a greater setback.
So you could even take this to the point of if all of the neighbors who would potentially be affected by a setback agreed, you don't need a setback, and we're willing to sign off to that effect, that would be the other side of that issue. And because there are places that I know that neighbors don't care about a setback. It doesn't bother them. And so what we got to do here is we got to talk about how we're not affecting or impacting neighbor-on-neighbor conflict.
Right.
So that's really the issue is that how do you draw that parallel between what we've done in the general plan update to try to reduce neighbor-on-neighbor conflicts versus what we're doing here?
It's on non-commercial right here on number 2, correct?
Right.
Yes, this is,
Right.
we're addressing the
But we're just
personal
talking about the
cultivation.
six-plant grow.
I want to be respectful of Supervisor Callaway's suggestion. I assume she would like to poll on eliminating, eliminating the addition from the Planning Commission, basically putting a period at not continuously owned, period. Is that correct?
Or even if it's next, I mean, we're really talking about the RR's zones. I mean, because that's where the impact is, in Lakemont, Meadowmont, and Fieldstone, and or wherever it might be,
Well,
in Hathaway Pines.
The R1 is your typical single-family
Right.
residential suburban lot. RR ranges anything from 1 acre up to 20 or more.
100.
So we have, the RR is very broad. We do have smaller RR lots, but it's considered a residential zone. And that was the concern of the commission, that they want to ensure a greater setback for personal cultivation.
I mean, I understand that thought, but the reality out there in the communities is, well, people are growing 2 plants or 1 plant, and they're in an R1 zone, and their neighbor is an R1. Are we going to say, you have to pull your plant out? I mean, we're not going to be doing that. I mean,
this is, we're saying these are the standards, and this is strictly a policy call. There's no state law that says you have to have a specific setback to cultivate. So this is clearly a local policy decision by the board. How
Sure.
great of a setback do you think is appropriate for personal use?
May I put in a question, sir?
Sure.
As it's written right now, are any personal grows allowed in R1, R2, R3 outdoors?
Yes.
Outdoors?
yes.
Outdoors?
Outdoors.
Is
I
lo-
thought it was 6 plants.
6
That's the
plants,
max.
that's a
Up to
personal.
6 plants
Okay.
for personal use. Either.
So why are we pushing people 150 feet off of a zoning that is going to have 6 plants on it also?
Well, again, that was the Planning Commission's
That's-
recommendation of what they felt was appropriate policy for the
Okay.
county to
Oh, right,
protect their neighbors.
Right now, it's only allowed indoors. We haven't passed
Currently
this yet,
under-
but in here, it's allowed
Right.
outdoors.
Yes.
So,
You're
right.
That's what I wanted.
When you said right now, I thought you meant what's in the ordinance. I'm sorry. Right now. Yeah, right now, indoors only is what's allowed.
I was referring to this.
Yeah.
Gary is correct.
I
very much so.
appreciate the broader discussion, and I think it's important before we make our decision. That's why I wanted to bring up the outdoor point as well, because it wasn't discussed. It isn't part of what's there now, so it's an addition.
So I still don't have, nobody has asked for a poll on this item. Supervisor Callaway, do you want a poll on this item?
Yes,
Okay, so the poll is, so I've got it clear, removing the 150 feet. So basically eliminating the Planning Commission suggestion.
yes.
No. Is that clear? Okay. Supervisor Callaway,
Yes.
Supervisor Mills,
No.
Supervisor Sopper,
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenali.
No, I'll stick with planning commission.
Pardon?
No, I will stay with planning commission.
Okay, Garamendi, no. Excuse me, Garamendi, yes, I'm accepting the change put forward by Supervisor Callaway. You said no so many times, sounded like. Okay, so moving on to item, so did you get that?
Yes.
Next item under, anything under 3, 4, 5? 6, 7?
Wait a minute.
Hang on.
Thank you for moving fast. But,
Might be some flogging by the end of the day.
number 5, I think, so they're gonna put security fencing 6 feet, and I live on a 1/4 acre parcel, and my subdivision doesn't allow 6-foot fencing. I just think this is, again, not a reality of what's out there. And, you know, if people are gonna have 1 or 2 plants or whatever it is, and they have children in the house, are we saying to them, what? You can't have cannabis and have a child? Or if you have cannabis and you have a child, you have to do all this? We are not the parents. And if they're irresponsible, they're irresponsible. There isn't a lot we're going to be doing about that. I just think that this is, again, not something that we can really start going out there and enforcing. I don't think it's,
Do you have a
I
suggestion?
think,
change?
yeah, I think we should omit it.
So do you want me to poll on eliminating number 5?
Yeah, or modifying it.
Okay, is there any appetite for eliminating or modifying item 5? Supervisor Mills?
No.
Supervisor Stopper?
No.
Supervisor Stoffel?
No.
Supervisor Garamendi? No.
So, wait a minute, gentlemen. So you're gonna say that I need a 6-foot fence on my 1/4 acre parcel? And a subdivision that does not allow fences?
If you're doing outdoor, Marita,
And
you
it's
need
personal.
75 feet, you're not going to be able to get it on that 1/4 acre regardless of the situation.
Well, I mean, the reality is that it's out there. I mean, I can go to any subdivision in my district and find plants. And none of them have security, 6-foot security fencing. And I just think, how are we gonna manage it? So we go drive through Meadowmont and we find them, and is the code enforcement gonna say, oh, you need to put in a 6-foot fence? Oh, and you have a child, now you need to put a lock on it? I mean, I don't even think this is close to realistic. And now we're gonna have well, I mean, I just don't know, what are we gonna tell code enforcement? They're gonna drive
We've
the
polled,
streets?
Mr. Chair.
Polled on this, Rita.
Well, I know, I'm not, I thought maybe you should be somewhat realistic, gentlemen.
We polled on it. We're moving on to the next items.
Okay, so now,
My time's coming, I'll be the same way.
And then I will probably say the same thing more than once by the time we're done today, ladies and gentlemen. Number 6 or 7? Letter D.
on number 6, I'm trying to, so if I have 2 parcels, I just need 1 house, or do I need 1 house and a temporary dwelling? I wasn't clear on that.
So the state law allows cultivation per residence.
Right.
So if you have a residence and you have, multiple parcels that you own, you're allowed to have cultivation on anywhere within those parcels, if they're commonly owned. But you have to have a residence, is what it's saying.
On each parcel.
No.
So if I have contiguous two parcels, contiguous, I only need a house on one of the parcels, and I can still only do 6 plants. But if I have a house on each parcel, or a house and a temporary dwelling, I can have 6 on each.
You can have, and I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. It needs to be on the parcel in which the residence is located. The setback is measured from common.
Each parcel has to have a
So if
residence.
you have for example, a single-family residence and an accessory dwelling, you may have 2 non-commercial cultivation sites for each residence.
So I can have 6 and
No,
6.
one per residence. So you can have 2 if you have 2 residences on the parcel. So if you have a primary residence and a secondary residence, you're allowed to have 2. Because the state law says per residence.
Okay, so if I have an accessory dwelling, I can have 2 6s.
Yes,
Okay.
On the same parcel?
on the same
Yeah.
parcel.
Yeah, because with a multifamily condo, for example, it would be 1 parcel, but each of the residences within the building would be allowed to have, the state law minimum
On
is
their
6
deck.
plants indoors per
As long as they have a
residence.
Someone's
6-foot
going to get
fence.
killed over that.
But again, outdoor is
Stole
up
my
to,
plants.
outdoors up to the board.
Outdoor is going to be a problem in some of these residential zones. It's going to be a conflict. And you can quote me on that later.
All right, so are there any changes?
And we got it on tape.
Proposed for 6 or 7? Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm reading 7 correctly. Each person cultivating non-commercial cannabis shall maintain her residence in a dwelling on the parcel on which the cultivation occurs.
This
Okay,
is
now
state
I
law.
know I read it out loud.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
Any questions on section D? Commercial cannabis cultivation plants. Peter?
We have a couple of
Yeah.
suggested edits. The first one is in D1C. I don't know if there's anything before that, but from any
Where?
board members.
D1C,
C.
page 13 on the red line.
And this is just to, on the second line, the Planning Commission had recommended we change that to premises. We changed it back to cultivation site because the term premises wasn't used in our prior permitting registration requirement of the urgency ordinance. So this refers back to the registration that was issued. So we're going to use cultivation site as a more generic term here. It's just, I want to point out this was different than what the Planning Commission recommended. We had made the change as sort of a technical change, but the Commission wanted to make sure that we pointed that out. The other change that we have is, let me go to the errata here.
D7.
This is in D7, but there may be something before that, so we can wait for that.
So is everybody okay with that change? This is
So-
actually in the red line version, the cultivation site.
Yes, that was changed. I just wanted to point out that that was different from what the Planning Commission recommended because we felt it was a technical change that needed to be.
Everybody good with that? Ms. Keller?
Under 2, for A1, AP, et cetera, the permit type, I believe it was answered yesterday, but I want to confirm. It was the state's definition of canopy area? So where it says maximum 1 acre of total canopy area per 20 acres, or 1 acre of canopy per 20 acres. And I think because I wanted to change canopy area, I believe you told me that was the state's definition.
Yes, the canopy area is whatever has been licensed by the state as the plant area on the cultivation
Okay,
site.
I mean, I just want to make sure we're saying with what the state definition is, that we're not doing
I
our
don't
own on
think
the
we're
can.
being more restrictive than the state when it comes to defining the canopy area.
Okay, thank you.
Can you tell me the reason they struck max one premises per 20 acres, up to 5 premises per parcel? Why that was struck?
The commission thought that it would be more efficient, I believe, that if there are a number of smaller cultivators, say they're growing, 2,000 or 5,000 square feet apiece, that they could all sort of pool their resources and, so rather than limit it just to 5, whatever the number is, as long as it didn't exceed 1 acre per 20, which is sort of the cap, the physical cap that's been established. Or in the case of mixed light, it would be, half an acre. And so that's the reason. That they didn't think that it was needed to be limited by the number of cultivators, but by the amount of cultivation.
So if I have a parcel that's 150 acres and I get a permit to grow, I can have 7 grow sites?
Well, each of the, sorry, there's one here. Each of the individual growers would need their own permit. So each premises, we'll issue the permit to the premises. The way it's written now, for every 20 acres, the county could, for every 20 acres of parcel size, the county could issue a permit on that parcel. So if it's 100 acres, there could be, it's 20 times 5, so there could be 5 permits issued. If it's
Well, no, the Planning Commission changed that. That was what the board's direction was. The Planning Commission changed that so that it would be basically an acre of outdoor cultivation per 20 acres of land. So you could have more than 5 growers, any number, as long as it didn't exceed the area.
Right, I was using the 5 as an example, but if it's 120, then there could be 6.
No, Jaylee.
Oh, am I getting it
You're
wrong?
getting it wrong.
I wasn't
This is why I asked the question, so we could clarify it here and now.
The Planning Commission changed what Julie was talking about in the original draft, so that it is based on acreage rather than number of cultivators. And this was based in part on what code enforcement and the sheriff said was that they would prefer to see more growers together. It's easier to enforce, it's easier to inspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, but I think that's what the Planning Commission heard, was that, so why not have, 10 growers of 10,000 square feet apiece, as opposed to limiting that, if you have the acreage.
Well, that's kind of leading me to a question then, is have we clarified anywhere in this code that it's 1 permit equals maximum 1 site, or can 1 permit have more than 1 site?
So we've limited it to the number of previously approved registrants
That's the
with the
permits.
state license.
Right.
And so if grower A had 2 licenses, he could get 2 new cultivation permits.
And those would equal then 2 sites? Or could
they
it
would
be?
be 2 separate premises, 2 separate,
Okay,
they
but-
could be at different locations, they could be on the same location, depending on the acreage, the zoning, and...
Hear me all the way through on this.
Okay,
So
sorry.
someone has, a guy or lady, has 100 acres. They have a permit. They could then establish 5 sites on that 100 acres?
No, they could only establish 1 if they only had 1 previous permit.
I'm just wanting to be sure that there's a
Yeah.
relationship between permits and sites so that we don't, in essence, create this completely new multiple site
Right.
scenario.
The only way that someone could do that would be to acquire
Another permit.
another permit from someone
Right.
else.
Okay, I just wanted a clarity.
Right. In effect, I believe, right now, you have a number somewhere between 196 and 200. In effect, if people choose to go down this route, it lessens the total canopy area in the entire county. So, if people want to grow smaller, we don't have an objection to that.
That's correct.
And I think that's what the planning commission was going for, along with bringing people into areas so that it would facilitate the sheriff or inspections to move forward.
I want to clarify what Supervisor Toffenali was saying. So if you've got 120 acres, do you get 6 acres of cannabis on that?
That would be the maximum that would be allowed, yes.
And then just
But
up
you-
through the side?
Not you individually, but
No,
you
but
and,
that can exist on
That could
that
exist
lot.
on that parcel.
Under
yes.
6 different permits.
6 different permits, correct.
And that's the clarification I wanted to get here.
But-
And because of the changes in what we're talking about, is there any way to incorporate that here, say, per permit? Each per permit or something, so a year from now, 2 years from now, you've got people arguing about exactly what's being said here. Because it's not really clear, and that's why I brought it up, because and I understand what you're saying, and I know it's per permit, but it's
If I can,
kind of vague.
I have a
if I
suggestion
can
on
make
that.
it, you have a suggestion? Chris?
I have it noted here before because I wanted it to be more fluid. Down below, it says separate permit for each premises. I would say separate permit for each acre canopy.
or each site.
Or,
Or
I think
each
acre canopy, because then you could have
No,
smaller.
because that was what the commission was trying to get at, was if you had, 4 growers, each growing a quarter of an acre on a 20-acre parcel, that would be the same as one grower growing a full acre.
Full acre.
So they didn't really care about how many different permits were issued. They were concerned about the total area that's affected.
Right.
So it's not based on the number. So you could have any number of permits on a parcel as long as it didn't exceed 1 acre per 20 acres of land.
Could you read me the definition of premises, please?
It's-
That's under, just to be
That's
sure
state code.
we're speaking in the same language here. It says per 3 CCR 8000, I think, or somewhere in there. Yeah, 3 CCR 8000. I think if we understood what that word premises meant, that might take some of the discussion out of it.
Premises means the designated structure or structures and land specified in the application, which was the state licensure application, that is owned, leased, or otherwise held under the control of the applicant or licensee, where the commercial cannabis activity will be or is conducted. The premises shall be a contiguous area and shall only be occupied by one licensee. So under state law, they're only issuing, so if you're doing, for example, indoor and outdoor, they're separate premises for the indoor and from the outdoor. Each premises gets one license.
Mr. Mauer, it may be beneficial to have the diagram that you had earlier as it related to setbacks, but here it would show the difference between a premises versus the cultivation area.
Because the premises could be more than an acre.
I'm thinking Supervisor Stopper's suggestion sort of encapsulates
That's what I'm trying to,
keeping things in there.
I'm trying to.
So, while he's pulling it up, or we're talking about.
I would like
do you
to
want
pull
on
a board on it.
there? All right.
What was your suggestion again?
Suggestion is
Separate permit for
canopy
each acre canopy.
versus premise.
That clearly states, that clearly states the point.
Okay, so let me pull on it really quick. Supervisor, the poll is to change the thing from premise, separate permit for each acre of canopy. That premise.
So I'm not sure that makes sense.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense because your point, there could be 4 permits for a 1 acre canopy because each person is only growing a 1/4 acre.
The way the draft was originally created was essentially along the lines of what Supervisor Stopper is suggesting, was that you could have 1 permit, 1 premises per 20 acres. And it didn't matter what the size was, that was allowed. So
Maybe I have the wrong word, cultivation site.
it doesn't really, the cultivation site is a component of the premises. So if you have a building that is used as a part of the operation but doesn't actually contain live plants, that's a part of the premises. The cultivation site is that area that contains live plants. But if you have a permit, if you apply for a permit from the county and you get a license from the state, you're authorized for a specific premise on a piece of property.
Here's an issue I have with that. I get where you're going with it, sir, and maybe everyone wants you to finish so that they can understand what you're saying. But there's a problem with the premises and the fact that if we have multiple cultivation sites within an acre, and someone has a well which is used for those multiple cultivation sites within that acre, then at that time, that's all part of the same premises. Is it not a well is considered part of the premises as in your diagram. And so at this time,
It's possible that the state would recognize well, I don't know the answer to whether if you have 2 overlapping premises and then one corner they share a well, and the state would recognize that well as being part of 5 different growers' premises. I know that what we've tried to do here is make sure that the unit that we're issuing a permit for is contiguous with the unit the state is issuing a license for. So that was the reason for doing that. It's a lot easier for us to issue a permit for the same unit that the state license is being issued for. So I don't know the answer as to whether or not the state would recognize, and I don't know that a water source needs to even be on the same premises. There could be a well on one person's premises and the state would recognize it as an adequate water source for 4 other.
Or the well could be serving the residents on the parcel if there was one. And the residence is not usually part of the premises. So there's, activities associated with the property I don't think the well has to be part of the premises, I think is the bottom line. What we're looking at more is, storage of equipment or fertilizers, that kind of stuff. That has to be part of the premises. But a well, that could be used for other activities not associated with the cultivation, but could also be used for cultivation.
I just strongly recommend, staff strongly recommends that we not try to issue a permit for a unit that's different than what the state issues a license for.
I don't think that's where the board is going, but I think the question is so getting back to the change that the Planning Commission made, do we want to keep it as 1 permittee per each 20 acres, or do we want to be able to allow multiple smaller growers to co-locate, as long as it doesn't exceed the area?
So under the scenario that you're speaking of, and say there's 4 people that want to apply for a permit and have a 1 acre grow together, a 1/4 acre each, and they found a suitable place to do it. You would, under their applications, they would submit to you for a 1/4 acre grow, and you would grant them a permit for a 1/4 acre grow, and their map showing to you would show the other grows on the premises, or just their 1/4 acre on the premises.
Their application would show what they are proposing. We would compare that with any other application for the same site to ensure that it doesn't exceed.
So would just the verbiage at the bottom here, given that what you're saying, separate permit for each premise, up to 4 permits per premise?
Well, it could be if they were growing 5,000 square feet, there could be more than that. I mean, you can establish any limit you want on it.
I'm just trying to clarify so
Yeah.
it doesn't come up later on, because obviously it's going back and forth and everywhere here, and I'm trying to get that
No, I
settled.
understand,
Yeah.
I understand, and this is, one of the things when you draft an ordinance, you think you have it wired, and someone else reads it, and they read it entirely differently, so this is a great discussion we're having.
So,
We do have more clarification in other provisions of the code that might solve this problem. But we can certainly add language here that, makes it out, more clear.
If the operating restrictions and eligibility requirements go into more detail about everything in the chart.
so I don't think we've got an easy answer on this one. I think the intent, what we want
There's
to do is
intent
pretty
there.
clear.
Yeah.
How we say that beyond
can
what
we-
you've currently
Well, may I
got.
suggest
Can we,
that-
can we do this, Mr. Chair? Can we revisit this later on? We're going to revisit some of it, maybe give some
Yeah.
time to think about it in the back of our mind, to clarify some of it, and then have a discussion later. And we can go through the rest of this, and Peter could be right that it could clarify itself later on in here, but I didn't see anywhere here that it did, but
It would give some of us opportunity to look up some stuff with the state during lunch, and that way,
We will circle back on this. If we haven't solved it for ourselves by the time we get to the end, we'll circle back and see whether
I-
we can clarify, because these are all really good points.
I do have another
All right,
thing I would like to pull the board on here.
sure.
Under allowable license types, on the bottom, I would like to add a bullet point, is nursery, and with the understanding that it's not going to be a new, it's not going to add to that to 196. If someone was to choose to make a nursery instead of a commercial cannabis grow as defined here, they could transfer that license over to a nursery. Nurseries, this is a type of cultivation. They have lower impacts on water and veg as small plants and no smell. And the EIR does address it in nurseries in 3.5.16 in the EIR under water quality impacts.
Okay, you want to discussion or move to a poll on whether to include nurseries? Mr. Maurer, is there any reason we can't do this?
There's no technical reason why we can't. It's clearly a policy call by the board.
All right,
As Mr. Stopper pointed out, the original project description included nurseries, and so the EIR has addressed it.
Are we going to be adding, we're not adding additional numbers of permit types that we use in
No.
the 198?
Strictly transferable from the canopy from a permit before. I do
Yeah,
not
I'll
want to
have
add
to-
anything.
There'll have to be some changes throughout the ordinance, because right now it's written in a way that doesn't allow it, so we'll have to modify the ordinance.
Right. We're going to have to bring this back later, I think.
Well, maybe the best thing to do is a poll now to see whether, from a
See
policy
whether it
perspective,
flies.
that's what the board wants to do, and then we can go back through the ordinance and make sure that we don't create any conflicts with that.
very well. Nurseries, Supervisor Toffenelli?
no.
Supervisor Stopper, yes?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
No.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes. Nurseries is added, so as we read through this, just make sure we don't get ourselves in a knot. Okay. Any other changes on that chart?
That specific chart, Chair, or would you include the number 3 chart as well?
Let's check off 2.
Just 2.
Anybody else on number 2?
I do.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
On the back page, on the last chart, talks about a conditional use permit. And I just want to be clear, because I'm still unclear of what the last item on our agenda yesterday, the first item on our agenda yesterday on the department that was created. Who issues this conditional use permit?
That would be the planning department.
So the planning department, the new department that's been created would be cut out of it, and the conditional use permit would solely be issued by the planning department?
No, it would be a separate permit, so they would sort of apply for their cannabis permit with the new department, indicate, the new department would indicate, well, this is less than 20 acres, so you need to apply for a conditional use permit. A separate application would be filed with the planning department and would work cooperatively with the cannabis coordinator. That would go through hearing process to the planning commission, looking at all the broader issues, CEQA analysis, because it's discretionary. And then if that's approved, it would kick back to the cultivation office to finalize the permit issuance.
Okay. That's the only question I had.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that, we'll move on to item 3, which is the chart that sits in front of you. The applicant, if applying for indoor cultivation permit, owns or leases a parcel conforming to the following requirements. Any changes to this chart?
So just for,
Supervisor Mills?
yeah, just for clarity, we are including commercial zones now in specialty indoor?
So the specialty indoor, currently the dispensary ordinance allows cultivation within a dispensary. But as Julie described earlier, they have to have separate licenses for the dispensary, the retail use, as well as the cultivation use, because we don't have the micro-business license, at least not at this point.
So I guess my question is, for those that were indoor grows before, they were primarily in M zones.
Yes.
And we're very limited in our M zones in this county, as you well know. Is there any accommodation to opening some of the commercial zones up to indoor cultivation? In other words, if they have a difficulty in finding an M zone, would there be a way ministerially for them to find a commercial zone that would be appropriate and still fit within our rules?
Under the way this is drafted, no. It's only allowed in the industrial zones. We could add commercial zones if that's what the board's desire was. But at this point, it's only allowed in the 3 industrial zones.
And that's...
And the commercial professional office zone in conjunction with a dispensary.
Well, it's just one of those feedback things that I got, and because we're so limited, if we're going to help to start resolving odor issues, one of the ways we can do that is push more of the potential growing indoors. And since we're limited in M zones, the only other option is to find appropriate commercial zones that would give them that opportunity.
Supervisor Mills, are you suggesting we expand it?
Suggesting what, sir?
We expand it to commercial zones?
I agree with Supervisor Mills.
Wow.
That's 2.
No, I just think that there needs to be a discussion, but what exactly that means and where would you go? I think that would be part of that conversation. Do you want me to ask for a poll on that?
You can, if you want a poll to see if
Okay,
we expand the
I'll poll for
opportunities.
that. I'll poll for that.
Okay.
I see a look of, I'm not too sure what you're doing. Where, I mean,
I want to consider.
There's a lot of facets of commercial that,
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to say, that if we're going to go into that discussion, we have to be very specific about what does that mean? And I don't think we're ready to have that discussion.
Let's poll and see whether we want to have that discussion, because it is a lengthy one. Supervisor Mills is yes. Supervisor Galloway?
yes.
Supervisor Stopper?
I'm willing to have the discussion.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
No.
Supervisor Garamendi, no. So we're going to have the discussion.
So the only concern is, how we've analyzed it. under the EIR, and we want to spend some time looking at that just to make sure that we're not creating an impact that hasn't been looked at.
Do you want to do that before we?
So maybe we can table this discussion for this, at this point, or
Well, this is a significant change, I would imagine, when we talk about a lot of things around this. I mean, if we're expanding it to commercial, there's a lot of different types of commercial. We need to break down what that would look like in communities. A lot of those are in community planned areas.
Yeah,
So
we'd have to be very specific if we're going to go on that road, and really hone in and identify, again, to avoid conflicts.
Okay.
So,
Can we have a quick break? I'm sure it's time for staff, and
You know what,
I need
it is
the
time for
facilities.
staff. We're going to take
I
a 10-minute
apologize.
break. We'll return at 10:20. All right. Welcome back. We are discussing the pluses and minuses of adding commercial zones to cannabis cultivation as proposed by Supervisor Mills. And we took a break middle of that discussion. So let me see if the break changed anybody's mind, or whether we're going to, how we want to lead this conversation, Peter or Dennis.
I know you and I just had a brief conversation that the most appropriate would be a C2 zone. So rather than look at C21 or rural commercial or something like that, if we're going to have a discussion, probably would be limited to C2.
So is that a poll?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're polling, the new poll is, are we going to consider C2 as a possible zone allowed for cannabis? Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Stopper?
At this time, no, because I would have to sit down with a map and check everything, so no.
Supervisor Toffanelli?
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi? No. So let's talk about C2. What is the definition
So
of
C2 is a general commercial zone. It is sort of the transition between retail, your downtown commercial areas, and the industrial. Some of the uses allowed would be like auto repair businesses, light manufacturing, machine shop, things like that. I think that would be the only zone that I would recommend that it be added if the board is, I mean, there's 3-2 vote to add that right now, so that's.
And I would point out that most of the places like downtown Oak Hill are C2.
They are?
They are. Yeah, the old firehouse, we just,
Well, that was the one
There's
place where
quite a
we
bit.
rezoned it to C2, the rest was all zone C1.
right, but in the new general plan, a lot of these are for that mixed use.
There's quite a bit of C2 behind Cinders in Valley Springs.
I mean, I would agree with Supervisor Stopper that we should probably look at the maps to see primarily the C2 areas are outside of the downtown cores, but not always. There are pockets of C2 zoning in some areas that you would think would be more appropriately zoned C1. The general plan, I just want to go back to Supervisor Garamendi's comment, is a land use designation which allows a range of zones, including C1, C2, even industrial in some cases, as well as higher density residential. So the fact that the general plan identified these core areas doesn't mean they're going to all change to C2. It means that that's a suitable zone, but more than likely it's going to stay, C1 if that's what the zoning is today.
We've worked pretty hard in this document to keep it out of residential areas. I think this opens up the opportunity for it to move back in, which is just going to lead to problems down the road.
Can we see this in a map?
How could it,
Can I ask another question?
how could it lead to residential?
To Supervisor Garamendi's point, does PD have anything to do with this? Would that limit?
Plan development combining zone does not address use, it addresses design. And so we look at the layout of the building, the landscaping, parking, and how it may affect surrounding properties, but not the actual use.
I'm going to withdraw my vote on this and vote no.
Okay. Anybody else want to change their vote, or do I need to do a poll again? So it's now 3-2 no, unless anybody else wants to change their vote. Okay. C2 is off, commercial is off the table. Thanks for the conversation on that. We are discussing the box under item 3, on page 14 of the red line. Are there other changes that need to be discussed?
So this, when we first started talking about this box on number 3, you brought up the 1791 and dispensaries as it's saying now, but retail as per what state says, correct?
Yes.
So it says specialty cottage indoor here, which by state law is restricted to 500 square feet. And it also says specialty indoor, which is like 2,500 square feet, I believe.
I think it's 5,000 square feet.
Okay, 5,000. Is there nothing in here precluding that a dispensary can continue to produce its plants as per what 1791 says right now?
The state license types that were drafted in here were based on the square footage we were allowing for indoor cultivation. So once we got to the 10,000 square feet maximum, these are the 3 state license types that are within our square footage maximum.
Right. I just want to make sure that as we move on throughout this, there's nothing in there that precludes them from going beyond the specialty cottage indoor or anything that would conflict with 1791 as it is now.
Well, as it is now, they don't have to get a permit for their indoor cultivation. This would require them, in addition to having a dispensary permit, to receive a permit for the cultivation that they're allowing indoors, and they would be allowed the same maximum square footage that any other indoor cultivator could have.
Thank you for the clarity, Julie. I appreciate it.
Other items on there, Supervisor Mills, your lights on, or Supervisor Callaway? No? Okay, then we'll move on to 4, 5, 6, 7. Anything, Supervisor Toffenal?
Item number 5.
Okay.
Just to clear up the little thing here, when I read it, can we drop the S off of badges? It says the applicant ensures that each of its individual owners, as a term defined in Chapter 9.22 of the County Code, has a current valid commercial cannabis clearance badges as required. Should say badge. Mine
I think
says
if you're looking at
badges.
the underlined
Mine
strikeout,
says
the
badge.
S, you can't see the strikeout on the S.
Oh, you can't see the strikeout.
It is badge.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm using a strikeout, so it has been struck. Okay.
It's got it on this.
I can't see it on there. Yeah. You have the red line. I have a strikeout.
At least there was no,
Okay.
at least there was no stinking badges attached. Other items on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, page 15 through 14.
8,
On
Number 8.
7,
On
7,
number
you have a
7.
change.
we had a proposed edit for
Okay.
that section. And there was quite a bit of discussion with the planning commission as to how, if someone was denied and then that denial was overturned, how to describe that. And we're suggesting that the language here on the board is more appropriate than what the commission finally came up with, just because of some of the weird nuances of the language, what quasi-judicially means, and those kinds of issues. So we're recommending that this language be added.
On where?
It says D7B or D7, the bottom paragraph there.
Section there. We changed that.
Having a red line helps.
So so instead of, if they receive a citation, but a citation could be for something minor versus an abatement?
Well, the citation for unlawful cultivation. But if, in some cases, someone might have been cited for something and later found that, that was issued in error, either the county could rescind it, or if they went to court to appeal it, and the court overturned the county's decision. But that's what that section is trying to address.
But if they receive a citation for something really minor, like they didn't have their sign posted, and they take care of it?
Well, that would
what
normally be in the normal code enforcement procedure is like, you get essentially a warning. Here are things you need to do to correct. And so you get a correction notice, and okay, they posted a sign. Then they would not receive a citation for unlawful cultivation at that point.
Okay.
If they never corrected it, they might end up having had their prior license revoked at that point in time. But
And usually in our hearings, there was a whole lot more going on than just failing to post a sign.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, there are many times when code enforcement officers went out in the field and they found some minor irregularities. The sign wasn't posted properly, there was a hole in the fence. Go and fix it, we'll be back in 5 days. And they did, and everything was fine, they signed off. That was probably, the more common thing than actually, a letter from code saying these people should be denied because they failed to comply with the requirements. And then this is our standard practice with any kind of code violation. The idea is to bring people into compliance. So if someone's got a building permit and they've added on without a permit, the thing we do is tell them to get a permit, and they do, and they correct it, and we're good. So the same approach was taken throughout the urgency ordinance with cannabis cultivation, bring them into compliance. And sometimes it was, I think the term was used earlier yesterday about holding hands.
babysitting.
You had to sort of help them along to understand the code, and we try to do that. But we weren't going to just deny someone for a minor inconsistency when they could easily correct it.
Is there any objection to the changes proposed? Seeing none? You're good.
number 8.
Number 8, Supervisor Mills, what do you need?
Yes, to add past county taxes, a comma, penalties or fees.
Sorry, could you say that again?
To add a comma, past county taxes to include penalties or fees due.
I guess my question is, what if it's not related to cannabis, but related to something else?
It says unlawful cultivation.
Yeah.
As long as it's within that definition, I'm good with that. It should be part of the compliance schedule prior to application, most definitely.
Is that it? Mr. Maurer, is there a reason we can't do that?
I'm not aware of any reason why we can't say they have to be current with any other provisions of the county code. So if they're
Related to that commercial cannabis.
Activity within the county.
maybe I'm confused what the question is, I'm sorry.
No, that's,
Right now, it says that this is limited to payment of the cannabis tax, the Measure C tax. If it's the desire of the board to add that they're not delinquent in their property tax or any other fees assessed on the parcel, that's I think a policy call, unless there's any reason.
I think
Julie defined it as what he was talking to is it would finish with commercial cannabis activity within the county. So if any fees or other things, that's what I'm understanding from you, right? It has to do strictly with the cannabis thing, so any delinquent fees or anything else in the past. I mean, I think it kind of says that elsewhere. If you were pretty much stricken from the record, or stricken from this list that's proposed right now of people, if you didn't pay your permit fees because you weren't in compliance. But it's a little bit redundant. But as long as it's within those boundaries of what's discussed by Julie and Dennis right here, I have nothing against it.
You want taxes, fees, or penalties due on any commercial cannabis activity?
Yeah, poll board for that.
Okay, so this is adding after the word county, at the end of number 8, past county taxes, including penalties and fees due on any commercial.
I wouldn't say including, because a fee is different than a tax. So I would say any taxes, fees, or penalties, because they're all separately defined.
Right.
Council?
So it would read, the person or entity is not delinquent in paying any county taxes, fees, or penalties on any commercial cannabis activity within the county.
Due on any commercial cannabis.
Can't cultivation permit required under this chapter, right? Oh, wait, I jumped to the next one. Sorry.
Number 8, so with that suggestion, as articulated by Council Stedfield. Supervisor, is that correct? Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Stamper?
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenali?
Yes.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi? Yes. Okay, please add that in.
Foregoing that anybody has anything on 9 or 10, I have something with 11 that goes back to 5 that we brought up yesterday, and I have a suggestion on how to deal with this. Is on number 11, the person or entity is and remains in compliance with all applicable provisions. I would like to strike of this chapter and then dot and then put a period after that, strike the rest of this sentence in 11 after that, and then add in number 5 to include the employees section of 9.22 and 5, because when we go back to 17.95.030 B, we had this discussion, and it struck 5 in there on the subsections, except for subsections 5, 9, and 10, and 11 was in conflict with that. So I think this would solve that situation of bringing that out of 11 and adding it to 5. At that point, we don't have a conflict inside here that's...
So you're suggesting that on 5, we say the applicant ensures that each of its individual owners and workers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that would solve it. That's what my...
And then the only thing with what you're suggesting on 11, okay, that makes sense, but then the other part is, and the premises are located on a parcel in compliance with county code. So as written, section 11 requires not only the premises to be in compliance, but the parcel as a whole. So the philosophy was that if a landowner has a parcel that has other code violations, we wouldn't be giving them the benefit of profiting off of having a cannabis permit located on their parcel unless their parcel is brought up to code. So it's a policy call, but that's the other part of it.
I have a partial issue with the blue in the sense that is in compliance with county code is you can go on any property if you so chose and find something that doesn't have to do with a commercial cultivation that won't necessarily be in compliance with code.
Did you want to take them one at a time? Maybe.
Okay, yeah, no, I want to pull on moving the applicable provisions of this chapter after that and with 9.22 of the county code? Or and 9.2, anything to do with 9.22 and move it to 5 so that's addressed and then we can move on
And
to
then
it.
add workers. in
And
number
workers,
5.
yeah, I think that would solve our situation on that.
So, Julie, can you please read into what we want number 5 to look like, what Supervisor Stopper says?
Yes. So as Supervisor Stopper suggests, number 5 would read, the applicant ensures that each of its individual owners and workers, as these terms are defined in Chapter 922 of the County Code, has a current valid commercial cannabis clearance badge as required by Chapter 922 of the County Code. And then,
Let me pull on that one real quick,
Okay.
that way we can just put that to bed. Is there any opposition to that? Seeing none, you're good.
okay, and then as, taking just that one change out of 11, what Supervisor Stopper is asking for is, for now, the person or entity is and remains in compliance with all applicable provisions of this chapter, and the premises are located on a parcel that is in compliance with county code. So before we discuss parcel, that's how Chapter 11 would read. We would be eliminating the phrase "and with Chapter 922 of the county code."
You just need to take out and with chapter 9.22 and it will be of this chapter of the county code.
We could do that too.
Right, I think that's more fluid.
That, yeah, I mean, that is, well,
And
if
with
we take out,
chapter
if we take out the
9.22.
second part, then there's no point to have 11, because there's nothing left in it. Since we just moved it over to 5, right?
Well, I want to reread this, you're talking about the blue?
Yeah, if that was the next question, because we moved the first part over to 5, we took on workers. And so if we're talking about the blue, and we take out the blue, then there's nothing left in the 11.
Oh, I think
Well-
I don't have blue on my copy, that's the problem.
It's the final sentence after the copy or the comma on county code, and the premises are located on a parcel that is in compliance with county code. I would say, and everything on the premises is in compliance with the county code.
So that's a policy call, whether or not you want to require not just the premises, but the parcel to be in compliance with county code.
So if I've got, just so I'm clear, so if I've got a 100-acre lot and grandma lives off in the far corner in an old house, her house would have to come to code
Yes.
in order to have the
Yeah.
cannabis permit
As
a mile away.
Only if it was a non-compliant structure. I mean, if it's an old house that doesn't meet current standards, it's a legal non-conforming use.
But I
That would not
get
be a
code going
violation.
through grandma's
If they-
house
if
so
they-
we could determine that it's all
No,
that.
we wouldn't, if there was an outstanding code issue, so if someone had been cited for construction of a residence without a permit, for example, we're not going to do an inspection of the entire property, but if there's a known violation of the code, or if the code inspector drives up and sees something that's a clear violation, they would be able to cite it, and that would then prevent the issuance of the license until that's corrected. And that happened a lot of times when code went out to inspect sites, that there were other code violations that were sort of unrelated to the actual cannabis construction
Outside of the premise?
Yes.
outside of the premise. Again, it's a policy call of the board, whether or not you want to restrict this provision to just the premises or the entire parcel. But it wouldn't mean that they would do an inspection of every structure. It would only be that if they noticed a clear violation or we had record of an existing violation on the site.
That doesn't preclude that being dealt with through code compliance regardless of the situation. This is just piggybacking on another ordinance on something that's already law.
Right, basically
Right.
it's saying if there's a known violation, if there's a violation outside of the premises but on the parcel, the landowner, they would have to fix that before permits will be issued to growers trying to cite premises on that parcel.
I don't support that, because you could have some junk cars or junk out there, and that's not what they're there for. I mean, if the neighbor wants to complain about all the junk that's out there, that's a separate issue, and I don't think the two should be mingled. If there was electric wires on the ground, if there were wires on the ground, it was a real safety issue, I would agree with that. But if it's something on the parcel that has nothing to do with the premise, I don't think we should be requiring them to fix everything up before they can get their license.
I personally feel there's a clear path to dealing with these situations set before us right now for bringing properties into compliance. And this is a bit redundant. I think that the license, when someone buys a property, sometimes you end up buying a property with stuff out of compliance on, let's say the back 20 of a 100-acre piece. I don't think this would preclude of anybody on wrongdoing with what's left in here in the chapter of them being able to proceed with a license. So I would pull the board on, and the premises are located on a parcel, the premises.
So the person or entity and the premises are and remain in compliance with all applicable provisions of this chapter?
Are in compliance with county code.
Person or entity and premises.
Right.
And you're dropping on a parcel, correct?
Located on a parcel.
So you're
That is in
saying
compliance.
everything on
Or
the
the-
parcel has to be in compliance or on the premise?
I'm striking are located on a parcel. That,
Okay, you're
So
striking that.
and the premise is in compliance with county code.
Chair.
Right.
What I'm hearing is that number 11 would read, the person, entity, and premises is and remains in compliance with all applicable provisions of this chapter of the county code, period.
Yes.
That's what I'm
Yes.
hearing. Okay.
yes.
Got it?
Is it this
That's
chapter
the
of county
poll.
code or county code? Trying to,
I'm sorry?
I've heard a couple different things. Is it this chapter of the county code or just the provisions of county code?
The provisions of county code.
Thank you, Megan. Let me poll, see whether that's acceptable.
I have a couple questions first. So Rita, what you're saying is that if the inspector, code inspector goes out to inspect and he sees drunk cars there, which you brought up, he's to ignore it. I want to clarify what she's saying because that's what I heard her say. She doesn't think that that's part of it. So if I have just a business and I want to do an addition to my business and there's junk cars all over and somebody comes out to inspect and sees junk cars, that we're not supposed to do their job and say that's not, you need to clean that up, that's out of county code. We're supposed to ignore everything and focus on something because that's not what happens in reality. A lot of times when code inspection goes out for whatever reason, if they see something that's very blatant, they're going to write it up. So I'm not sure what you're saying and your intent here is.
My intent is they are there for a purpose to make sure that the premise is in compliance with this code.
I would concur.
And
I can't
if
agree with that
they-
then.
I can concur with.
Supervisor
Sorry.
Conway, not finished.
Sorry.
No, but, I mean, if there is a hazard, like wires on, electrical wires on the ground, if we've seen, I have no problem with that. But if there's other things on the parcel that...
So they're supposed to take you with them and see if you okay it or not?
I'll be happy to go with them, Supervisor.
Okay, come on, let's pull it back together.
I mean-
Supervisor Stopper, you had something you wanted to say?
I have a poll on this, and to tell you the truth, Mr. Toffanelli is right about the process. If a building inspector shows up to my house to inspect my building, and he sees something out in compliance on the property on the other side, he's within sight of it. At that point, he has every right to report it to code compliance and move forward. That's the way the other, that's the way the process works, and at that point, that could happen. But at this point, I'm separating that from the license because it's a separate problem from what these people are doing when it comes to cultivation. So that's where my poll rides doesn't necessarily coincide with Ms. Callaway's perception on how things are done. I'm separating the two things I'm separating the other thing from the business.
So we've got, as it read out, as was read by Ms. Stedfield, is that what you'd like to pull in, Supervisor Stopper? Is that?
Yes, absolutely.
And clarified, because I had indicated this chapter, you took that out as well. So I have it written down, the person or entity and premises is and remains in compliance with all applicable provisions of the county code, period.
That,
Can we say R?
on the premises, right?
He said, she said premises.
Okay, yeah. I heard
Okay.
you correct, that is my poll.
That's a poll. Supervisor Mills.
No.
Supervisor Callaway.
Yes.
Supervisor Toffanelli.
No.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes. 3-0, please make the change. Or 3-2.
There,
Yes. I made the suggestion, Gary.
He made the motion, so I was,
Thank you
I
for
should
checking.
check.
I appreciate it.
I hope you don't mind if we're saying the person or entity and premises, we can say R instead of is.
I think, yes. Okay, so we're on we finished number 11. I'm going down the list, 12, 13, 14. Anybody? 15?
I would like to make a suggestion on 15.
Okay.
I would like to amend it. Let me read this because my notes are confusing me.
This is the one that I was asking about originally.
Supervisor Mills?
Okay. So the number of cultivation permits any one person or entity may receive under this chapter shall be restricted to the number of premises for which the person or entity met the criteria described in 17.950050D1. Now, this is saying basically underneath it that a person may not acquire as a successor of interest from someone else, one of those that are within the 196, the way it's written right now. So I would like to amend it to say they may not, they only have 2 permits. Let's say they own 2 prior during the urgency ordinance. They may receive more under this chapter if they're included through the route of successor and interest, not adding to the total number, but because the way I read this precludes them, one person, from buying licenses from someone else and expanding on what they have.
So the way the ordinance is drafted is that the individual or entity that had the prior license would need to apply, and then it would be transferred, it could be transferred. What you're suggesting is that essentially the right to apply is a commodity that someone could acquire. So if Borough A decided, I'm not going to apply because I don't qualify in my location, I don't want to bother moving, but I can give it or sell it or transfer it somehow to Grower B, and Grower B then could acquire a number of other that you would like this drafted, and we'll have to really think about how the language
Right.
of this is
It
crafted.
does fall into what you're referring to when we get into successor and interest later. And this is part of the reason I was talking about adding a definition for successor for interest. So, I mean, and so this goes hand in hand with later. So, I mean, as long as we note this in the later section, I mean, I could go through and find it right now. We could come back and make it, you know, so it all flows properly. Because right now, there's no clear path for someone, let's say, with the way this coincides with the other chapter. There's no clear path for someone, let's say, that's part of that 190, that's on rural residential, 2 acres, because they have to apply for a license and qualify, as it's written right now, for them to sell that to someone else that would also have to apply, because they're not going to qualify on that 2 acres. It's not going to happen.
Well, they would have to identify some other location in which they could qualify and relocate. We do allow relocation from a non-qualifying
Right.
site.
I don't want to preclude them being able to sell that to someone else that goes through the process. You know,
If I could make a suggestion.
you're charging twice for the same for somebody doing something once.
Well, we're
when it
going
comes
to
down
take
to
up
it.
transfer as we move forward. But I would suggest that we just drop 15 altogether. Can you tell me why we can't do that?
The only concern I have with that would be that that is also our limitation on the total number. So if it's
Right.
dropped entirely, then it is an open-ended
Then
ordinance.
anybody who qualified under the UO could get numerous permits instead of just one, which would take us outside of the
190.
200 that
Well,
we
we've-
designed for.
Okay, maybe I'm confused, because we have, some 190 are in there. You know, those can be, those should be, it's a commodity, right? You have a license. If you decide, as you mentioned, you don't want to do it, or you can't do it, you could sell that, but that doesn't change the total of 190, right?
Right,
So-
no,
right,
that's the
so-
goal, that's what I'm hearing, I think the effect of actually removing section 15 would remove the language that keeps it to 190 in the first place.
How so?
Because if we don't say that the number of permits that you can get is restricted to the number of premises, so if somebody qualified under the UO, then they could seek additional permits simply because they qualified under the UO. So if I had 1 premises under the UO, and that's how we got to the 190s, we looked at how many premises each applicant had under the UO. If we don't have that in there, what would keep somebody from, who had 1 under the UO from applying for 3 under this ordinance?
So what I'm hearing is you would like to see something where instead of this sort of 2-step process of the original grower applying, getting approved, and then transferring it to someone else, you would like that transfer to occur at the first step of the process, so only the person that intends to continue to grow can acquire that up front. It's not a problem. We can craft language that allows
Right,
that.
but there needs to be other stipulations in there later that also, as long as they were within compliance and done their mitigation measures
And that's why I'm
on
saying, I
the
think we need to
premise.
carefully craft that language rather than just simply delete this section.
Right.
To say, figure out a methodology for
Right.
how that would be transferred up front, and that we somehow track that, this relates to permit number 2016-500.
Right,
And that has now been transferred from person A or entity A to entity B. Entity B is now applying for that one, plus his or her original permit, plus some other ones that he might have acquired, so we can keep track of, how we reach that total of 100.
yeah, and I get where you're going with it, and that's where I'm going with this, because right now, the way it's written, someone, let's say, like I said earlier, two licenses, it says 2 licenses, and if, so you're hitting 2 different things I'm talking about right now. 2 licenses, And this restricts them from buying one that was within that 190, so in the future. So I would like that taken care of so that somebody could acquire more than two as long as they're out of that pool of 190. And then also the path to what you just explained also. So, because there's two things here, I'm reading it, I may be wrong, and you could correct me on it, but I think, personally, I would like to poll the board on drafting it towards what you said, including the opportunity for someone to acquire a license that was within the original pool beyond the licenses they had, is that, as long as it's not adding to that 196 or 200 that you're talking about.
If I could make perhaps this suggestion in reading this, if we said the number of cultivation permits under this chapter shall be restricted to the number of premises for which met or meet the criteria described in 179505 D1.
I still think that would be a problem. I was playing with, I was thinking along the lines of the number of cultivation permits any one person or entity has the option to apply for under this chapter shall be restricted to the number of premises, and then something along the lines, these options may be transferred to other eligible applicants with eligible premises. But I think, again, we want to...
I think Julie's getting there.
We just don't want to restrict.
I understand the goal, but I'd like to have a little bit of time to play with language, not on the fly.
Yes, I want to be sure that we don't bury the understanding that under the ban there was remediation required, that somehow with the moving of a license or a permit suddenly doesn't remediate anything.
Right, no, that's addressed later.
That's addressed later, and I believe that would still be required. Make sure that it's crafted that way so that, if someone acquires 3 different sites, that all 3 of those ones are being transferred to a new location, those 3 sites all have to be remediated.
Prior to the transfer.
Prior to, that's my point.
Well, prior to the transfer or prior to issuance of the license on the new
Prior to the transfer. To me, it's prior to the transfer.
Well, that's where we got to work this all out, because I know it
sounds like there's a couple of polls that are necessary.
So no, let me start over. So we all have questions about 15. I think there's a general understanding that we want to allow people to buy and sell and conduct commerce of their business. Julie is going to try to rework the language in item 15, and this will fall on the very short list of items we're going to circle back on. So
it's getting longer.
It's getting longer, yes.
I'll put a
is
star.
that okay, or do you guys want to keep digging at this?
Well, I think for us to come up with language, we need to know the direction the board wants to take on this. There's one other question I have is, can that transfer be done to someone else who wasn't previously participating in the program? Or can it only be part of that list of number of people?
Let's ask a question. Can people transfer their license to people who weren't part of the original program, assuming they meet all the criteria?
Right.
So, okay, for example, Peter was not in the program, Julie was in the program, Julie wants to get out of growing cannabis, Peter wants to get in it, can Peter buy Julie's license? Is that the question?
Right.
Let's poll on that question. Supervisor Callaway.
Come back to it.
No. Yes.
Supervisor Mills.
No.
Supervisor Stopper.
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenelli.
Well, I'm reading what this says, and I'm not seeing that verbiage here in D1, 17.50050. So I'm a no.
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to allow a transfer of the right to grow as well as a post-permit issuance transfer. Those would be 2 separate. I mean, we have the transfer of the initial licenses already allowed under the current version of this chapter. What you're also talking about now is allowing the right to apply to be transferred before they actually apply. Is that correct? Do I understand?
I believe so. Why don't you unpack that just a little bit more? Julie?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was waiting.
I was hoping you could unpack what you just
Oh,
said.
the way that the ordinance was already written, we allowed, after the initial permit was issued to the people who had successfully grown under the urgency ordinance, we already have a section allowing them to transfer their permits to a subsequent qualified applicant. We have that in there. What the change that the board is now envisioning is that the initial applicant can be somebody other than who was growing under the urgency ordinance, as long as the option to grow has been transferred from that first urgency ordinance applicant to a second urgency ordinance, or to a non-urgency ordinance applicant. Is that correct?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, we
Okay.
do not want to
As
restrict.
long as the new person has to go through the full process of vetting to qualify.
Right, but they don't,
Yeah.
the difference is they don't have to have been growing under the urgency ordinance.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's a
Okay.
free trade thing. I mean,
Right, you don't
people
have
should
to
be able to
apply
build businesses,
for-
sell
You don't,
businesses,
right, you don't have
if they're
to
qualified.
apply for a permit, get the permit, and then transfer. You can basically sell your right to apply or transfer your right to apply to somebody else who would be able to qualify, except for having grown under the urgency ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
I understand.
In the majority poll, is
luck.
that?
I see the potential for some big corporation coming in here and just trying to suck up a lot of these smaller permits. So this commodity thing could turn into a bidding war.
Well, it's sellers. Well, I mean, this is business.
That'll
I
give
don't think
somebody
anybody
an
goes against
opportunity that can't afford to proceed, the opportunity to recoup some of their loss. And also, it's part of a free market.
And we took a lot of business away from a lot of people in the ban, and they should have the opportunity to regain some of their costs.
I disagree, but.
Other questions to clarify that, so we get 15 minutes?
I think I
Yeah,
understand.
I think we understand.
Okay.
We can draft that
Alright.
and make sure it's consistent elsewhere.
Thank you. So we'll circle back before we
Yeah.
close up.
Are we drafting this today, or are we going to have another?
We're not going home till we're done. And we'll bring it back for final. We'll bring it back for final on the 15th.
Yeah, Chair, I would highly recommend that we take all of this direction and make sure that we go back through it, incorporate the changes that this board is directing us to, and bring back for final adoption on the 15th.
Yes, but we're going to make sure we work through all the issues.
If-
We'll make it
Just to
final.
add,
It's not-
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
just to add, COG meets in here
We're putting in work
tonight.
today, I would not
Okay,
vote to
just telling you.
approve.
You can pack up your
Let
bags, you
COG
don't
know
have to.
we're going to do this till we're done.
I'm not gonna approve anything today that,
No, we're going to,
until I've seen a
we're going to
final
go through
draft.
all
no,
this
I-
work and give clear direction so we finalize this
Okay.
thing on the 15th.
Okay.
We all don't want to do this forever.
E?
E,
We're only on page 16, and there's 51 pages, so
we better get moving.
we still have 922 to go.
Huh?
We still have
I
922
know.
to go.
Just, let's get going.
Next one, item number 16, or line number 16, I would like to strike that.
Item 16.
I think we're infringing upon, just for this business, special plans or community plans. I don't know any other business that we have written in an ordinance says that it's exempt.
Was that addition by the planning commission?
Yes, it was.
You want to poll on that, Supervisor Toffenberg?
Yes.
Poll on removing item 16. Supervisor Toffenberg.
I would be a yes to striking that.
Supervisor Mills.
Yes.
Supervisor Callaway.
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes, it's struck.
Goes along with the
Next item.
But you do understand we can't, if if it's not consistent with the terms of a community plan or general plan, we can't. Okay.
It- A community plan is different than an HOA,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
and at that point, I think that addresses the issues we were talking about before, during 2016, when we're going through all this, when I was on the planning commission.
Right, so,
And it addresses now that Rancho Calaveras has a community plan that says no commercial, that there will be no commercial grows there regardless, it's already out of RR as it is.
right.
But I would completely support what Mr. Toffenelli has suggested.
So 16 is pulled, it is removed. E, self-distribution of commercial cannabis. Item 1 through 5, everybody have a suggested change? Seeing none, we'll move on to 060, commercial cannabis cultivation permit application. Anything you want to say about this before we dig in? Mr. Maurer?
We do have one proposed edit on B11.
B11.
Anything before that?
Okay, let me see if we got anything. Does anybody have any changes prior to, on 060, prior to item 11, B11? I would like to add something on number 8, an applicant license renewal permit or application fee. It's probably redundant of other places. Number 8, B8,
Application fee and permit fee.
a license renewal permit or applicable. Just in case, we have things that aren't directly a fee but are applications for permits. Are they different? Does this cover everything?
Well, this is what's required to submit the application.
Right.
And so the renewal fee is covered in a separate section.
Okay.
There would be other, any other, fees or, say the RIM fee, for example, is covered under the
Separate section.
issuance provision. So I think it's okay, it's the application, having it as an application fee here, but
Okay.
I would agree with him on the sense that, or applicable, we could add or applicable, application or applicable fee, because we do have 9.22 that's part of going through the process. That is another fee that you would have to do in the original application.
but that's an application that's submitted
Under different
for
codes.
that process rather than this process. This is specific to what you need to apply for your cultivation permit.
And lean towards getting this done, I withdraw my suggestion and move forward. Okay, Peter, you had an issue on number 11.
So I think this is probably one of the more complex and controversial aspects of this ordinance. This was a mitigation measure that came out of the EIR to offset the greenhouse gas emissions. We realized after review by the Planning Commission that somehow in the translation from the EIR to the conditions, it didn't quite come out right. So we've proposed some revisions to this to actually more closely reflect what the, unfortunately this is split by the page, more closely reflect what the EIR had intended. And really it's an either or provision, and the way it was crafted, it came out as an and, that you had to do both. And so here you have an averaging of the offsets, or the impact of greenhouse gases, and you can offset it by this amount, or you can do an analysis of your site specific and come up with a different number. But this is one that would just sort of be, this is what's required in the EIR for offsetting the impact to greenhouse gases. And so we've sort of reworded, restructured this. It's the same intent. It's actually what's in the EIR. There is another issue that we sort of thought about this morning, was that because the ordinance allows for an increase in outdoor cultivation from half an acre to an acre, that we could consider adding a provision that requires a site-specific analysis for anything over half an acre. That way, we're ensuring that we are offsetting to the full degree the impacts on the environment because of greenhouse gas emissions.
Peter, some of the counties actually go through and require purchasing carbon offsets. We don't speak to it directly as being a purchase here.
Yes, we do. That's one of the options. If you look at,
Well, it says this documentation of offset credits.
that's essentially says, show us that you purchased the offset. And that's going to be the simplest way. I mean, someone could, they could demonstrate that, because they have, solar operated system for their lighting.
Because it's going to directly impact the EIR, I'd like to take up this item, number 11, in closed session at lunch, if that's okay, because otherwise, that's advice I've got. Is that okay with you, Supervisor Mills?
Wherever it needs to be done.
Okay.
Okay.
So here we are, out of order. Major issue. But I think that I'll take the advice of our counsel. Okay, so, got anything else on there, Peter? Sorry about that.
No, that's
You were
fine.
just getting rolling.
I have nothing else as far as edits until we get to Q.
So,
Maybe I should-
with the exception of GHGs.
Maybe I should ask this question then. So are we going to also discuss in closed session about renewable energy requirements that are part of this?
Chair, all that I was asking for was for procedurally, if through all of this, that at lunch, that we break and go back into closed session to discuss broadly about some issues. You can continue in the discussion. I was just procedurally, an FYI.
Megan doesn't usually pass stickies down here, so it jumped out.
Okay.
I apologize, Supervisor Mills.
No.
Mr. Maurer, my apologies. Please continue.
So there are several options that were recommended in the EIR. Direct offsets by installing solar power, for example, use of different kinds of equipment, or purchasing credits. Purchasing credits are obviously going to be the easiest thing to do, and that's one of the options under 11C.
And one of the ways that I'm seeing in other counties is part of this statement, they say very clearly, generators are prohibited. That's just their way of dealing with that issue.
We have prohibited generators in another section of the code, not for this purpose, but because of the noise issue that was brought up during the urgency ordinance. But
Other
it's still
counties.
prohibited except for emergency purposes.
Yeah, but other counties bring it up as part of their greenhouse gas discussion.
The state brings up generators also.
Right.
Well, they would need to look at that. If they're doing a site-specific analysis of, they would look at all the power equipment that they have on site. There's a modeling that's done. You plug it in, and it kicks out the number of this is what your operation would typically generate. You plug in the kinds of offsets through use of solar power or wind power or some other non-GHG emission type of power source, and crunch the numbers, and either you zero it out because of use of non-combustion type of equipment, or you pay the offset to an appropriate mitigation bank.
Can you scroll that down a little bit? Pardon? I'm sorry, I was just trying to read that.
Maybe if I zoom out a moment, see the whole thing.
I see.
Is there any objection to what is submitted here by Mr. Maurer? Or should we accept it as whole? Just take a second and read it. This replaces section, the entirety of section 11. Can you roll down just a little bit?
Let me just copy it so we don't have that break in the page. And I'll put it on a separate page so we can just look at it.
So I'm clear, we're using a pretty broad brush, but you have a choice, as I understand this, of accepting the broad brush approach or doing your own individual analysis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it also provides you different ways to mitigate the CO2 output.
Right.
So let me conduct a poll. In accepting, let's see if we can just do this the easy route, which is there any interest in accepting these changes as a whole?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
No.
Supervisor Stopper?
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenali?
Hold on a second.
Sir.
So this whole thing's been taken out.
No.
Okay. So, Garrity, yes. Mr. Mauer, we accept your changes as a whole. We will further discuss this for the board. We will have closed session at lunch. Discuss any impacts this might have. Nothing? C. Okay, we are on, I'm sorry.
I thought 12 was omitted,
No, no,
looking.
11. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Then we're talking 11.
So, let's see. So this issue, let me get back to that section of the code here. Again, this is another one that we've heard a lot of discussion on. I know that we've had conversation, and I believe that Mr. Banner is here to answer any questions that you might have regarding water wells and the monitoring requirements for that.
We're on item 12.
This comes up multiple times.
Do we want to discuss it here, or do we want to discuss it on deeper?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong. I jumped ahead.
Okay.
So,
this one doesn't deal directly with the wells. This is about the square
Yes, you're
footage
right.
and being exempt.
I saw water and my mind went to
Right.
something else.
So
I'm
we're
trying to
on-
do too much at once.
we're on 1795070 now. We're starting the issuance of commercial cannabis cultivation permit section. Suggestions on A or B? Suggestions on C?
I have a couple things on C.
Supervisor Toffenali.
It was 5,000, but the planning commission bumped it up to $7,500
Yes.
based on, just threw it out there. And do we have any?
They felt it was a more appropriate number. I'm not
Okay,
sure how they
and,
came up
but there
with
was no evidence that any remediation that needed to be done if the permit was pulled, that $7,500 was adequate for cleanup purposes? And I'm assuming this is after the sheriff eradicates and we have money to go in and clean the site up properly instead of just leaving the pots there and everything, trash or whatever happens to be there. That we would adequately go in and clean the property up based on $7,500.
And to that point, that would be my question as well, is what studies have we done to actually prove what the cost is to do these cleanups, total cleanups and remediations that might be required? I'll give you an example is that a surety bond to run an electric golf cart at Greenhorn Creek is $1 million. So I'm wanting to know whether or not this is truly going to cover the costs and what foundational data do we have to prove it will.
What I can say, Board, Sheriff DiBasilio, so everybody knows who I am, we haven't gone in and done an eradication on a registered grow. Again, like I said the other day, we do illegal grow sites. What I can tell you is that to eradicate an illegal grow site, which is going to be similar in essence, is about $3,500 to $4,500 depending on the manpower, the equipment, and just how long it takes. That's just removal of plants. That's not removal of any hoses, piping, water tanks that are there with chemicals in it. That's just plants. So that's all I can speak to because that's all we take.
Is there a change you'd like to make to letter C, Supervisor Mills? First poll on.
Well, actually, it was Supervisor Tofinelli that started the conversation.
And I had another question before we go into that on this issue. It says a cash deposit or a surety bond. Normally, bonds have an annual fee associated with them. So there's no verbiage in here stating that annually you have to have proof that you've kept your bond in place. Otherwise, somebody can just come in and get for the application and say, here's the bond that's been issued, and then a year later, they just stop paying on the bond. We need some mechanism, I think, to make sure that the bond is effective during the whole time of the operation as it exists. And I don't have a figure, but I do believe $7,500 is pretty low to clean it up, even based on what it is to go in and cut the plants out and leave the pots and everything else there. There's associated cost to that. A $7,500 bond, it would cost very, very, very little. I've had to put money up for $1 million bonds, and that amount is not an exorbitant amount of money for construction sites. So, you know, I don't think $1 million is needed here, but at least I think something more substantial than $7,500 to go clean it up if it happens. So, you know, $50,000 is $50,000 surety bond could possibly be enough.
You want to poll on it?
Yes.
Poll $50,000 surety bond. Supervisor Toffman?
No.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Callaway?
No.
Supervisor Garamendi? No.
My question.
Excuse me. To make sure Supervisor Toffman.
Yeah. The other one was writing something in here, mechanism to make sure that they annually pay for the bond and it's kept.
We can add something to 1795-140, which is part of the annual renewal. We can verify that the bond is still valid.
Okay.
I'll come up with language to that, but it's adding provision.
Okay.
My question is, at what point do we continue to do it? I heard Supervisor Tofinelli said as long as they're in business, but if they could be in business for 10 or 20 years and they're still paying on the surety bond. I have a developer now who's giving up his project because he's been paying on his bond every year, and he doesn't think, you know, he should keep paying on it because for other circumstances, he can't develop the property or has chosen not to, that at some point, do you say to a business owner, that's fine, you know, you've built up your reputation, and, you know, if you sell, then it would start over. But I think to go, whatever the number is, 7,500 or 50,000, at some point, that's something else they keep paying every year along with their taxes, along with their fees, not only to the county, but to the state. I think there needs to be a time limit on that. A surety bond for 5 years.
Do you want to poll or do you want to make a suggestion?
I make a suggestion that there be a time limit on how often they have to keep renewing their surety bond.
That's interesting, because when you're in a construction site, you have to hold the bond for the entire period.
Yeah, but
you're in
during the
site.
term of construction, but when the construction project's over, you're done.
Well, when your growing's over, you're done.
Okay, hang on a second. We got a poll for us. The poll is to discuss putting a timeline on how long people need to hold a bond while they're in business on this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
No.
Supervisor Stopper?
No.
Supervisor Toppel?
No.
Supervisor Garrity, no.
I have
Before I
some,
surrender, anything else?
Before you surrender?
Surrender the microphone over to Pass. Just want to make sure you get your.
Supposed to have a white flag.
I will say that. Supervisor Stopper?
there's already a $5,000 bond established by the state, so this would be $5,000 more on a second bond, or?
Yes.
Well, right now it's written as 7,500. So there's, you know, at the point of something going wrong on the property and these people being denied, there's already two $5,000 or a $5,000 bond, and right now suggested is a $7,500 bond. Mr. DiBasilio did bring up a very good point that most of his eradications have been on illegal grows, and the fact that
All of his eradications. Not
Well,
some.
I guess they're all illegal at this point. Correct, sir?
Well, let me clarify. Yes, right now they are all illegal. During the urgency ordinance, most of the eradications, once 806 was put into place, was done by code compliance. Some were done by the sheriff's office. But again, when we do an eradication, it's done on an illegal grow site and it's done with a search warrant.
Okay.
So it's different from what the registered growers were doing. So you would have to speak with code compliance to find out what their costs were for their eradications.
Okay, and so generally, when you're going onto these sites that were regulated grows during that time, your experience is the chemicals and pesticides that come into question more generally were found on properties that were illegal grows as opposed to regulated grows?
Generally, yes.
Who takes care of those at that point?
That's a good question.
Right. I would like to ask Mr. Brad Banner up to the podium to talk about that.
Brad, that's fine. When code compliance goes in and abates a property, they lien the property because the board votes on it. So in this case, if code enforcement goes in and abates a cannabis site versus just a junk site, don't they lien the property?
That's correct. The only time that the costs of remediating or curing or abating a nuisance, even if it's illegal cannabis or even if its nuisances exist on a registered cultivation site, the only time you wouldn't recover all those costs is if the cost of recovery exceeded the value of the property. The cost of abatement exceeded the value of the property, because When you do an abatement lien, it's a super priority lien. It jumps ahead of the first mortgage. So when the property gets sold eventually at a tax lien sale, we get all the money back that we spent on the abatement.
If it sells.
If it sells for in excess.
Right. No, the abatement lien becomes a property tax. It's treated exactly the same as a property tax.
So the sale would have to at least equal what the lien.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the cost of abatement exceeded the value of the property, then you wouldn't recover that.
So you're saying this is addressed through 8.06 and code compliance for the most part? To a certain extent. So the second bond on our mind right now is the fact that the property is the bond.
Okay, is there a report?
You have questions?
Sir, being with environmental health, who goes out on these illegal grows and takes care of the hazardous material?
Code enforcement has been doing that. Environmental health has not been doing that.
Okay.
Environmental health, we've got 16 programs, 3 staff. We're responsible and get audited for our programs. What we have done is put in a proposal as part of this registration program to have a person that could kind of oversee this and coordinate this if that's what the board chooses. The position would handle the additional load of well permits and septic permits, site plan reviews, and the position could also kind of be responsible for having the contracts for the cleanup entities and oversee it. The position would be funded to the portion that does well and septic permits. Those fees would pay for that portion. So the only portion that would be directed of a cost to the registration would be the direct services to that. The problem that we have is environmental health specialists need to be registered, and there is a very, very shortage of registered environmental health specialists, not just in Calaveras County, Amador, Tuolumne. You just can't find them. So you end up hiring a trainee right out of college, and that's not the kind of person that you want to have in such an important role. So the other alternative is an environmental health technician, and again, that's a low-paid $16 an hour entry type role. So what we proposed was a cannabis assessment and enforcement specialist, environmental assessment and enforcement specialist. A job classification was developed based on Tulare has a similar position, and then we worked with our sheriff's department. We worked with Dr. Gabriel. We worked with Todd Talhammer from Cal Recycle to kind of tune up this job classification. And so that's kind of where it sits now. I think follow up on this.
Surety bond, that's the subject.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand, but you're
Sorry,
right.
I'm just kind of rambling on, sir.
I mean, this will come up later, so I could bring it up later. So the surety bond?
Surety bond, item in front of us.
All right.
Is there any poll to change this, or are we have one poll by Supervisor Top now? Is there any other ideas before we go on?
Would it be valuable to listen to Mr. Oliver and code compliance regarding the costs that code compliance undertaking to do current cleanups? Would that be valuable in this discussion?
Mr. Ethan Turner just addressed that.
All right.
Is there any desire to have further discussion on this? So everybody's okay with 7,500?
No, but.
Not everybody's okay? I personally believe that 5,000, that $2,500, if you've got a big mess, it's not going to change things. And also, $5,000 bonds are pretty easy to go get. 7,500 is kind of a special product.
I don't know that anybody provides a 7,500 for medical, because the state across everywhere I've seen does $5,000 bonds.
I mean, 7,500 looks like someone said, well, that's just not enough. Our number's enough, 7,500.
So what I'm hearing Supervisor Garamendi say, is it difficult? I don't know. Is it difficult to get a 7,500 versus a 5,000?
Actually, they're broken up into 2,500, 5, and then you've got 10 and 25,000. It goes up in increments. So when you go to
increments of
75, you're hitting a midpoint in what a normal bond would look like. That's where the difficulty would be.
I mean, if that's the case, I'd propose going back to 5,000.
Poll,
Yes.
go back to 5,000. Supervisor Mills.
No?
Supervisor Stopper.
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenali.
No.
Supervisor Garamendi, yes.
Can I just get clarification on one thing? So the county's bonds for 5,000 and the state has 5,000. So there's $10,000 available for abatement, correct?
Clean up.
5,000 is available to the state for abatement and 5,000 through their bond process and 5,000 for us if we abate.
Yeah, we
They
have
don't-
no idea what the state does with their money.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
They put it in a train nowhere.
All right, so we're moving on to letter D. Anything? E?
Oh, wait a minute, D, this is why I still do not understand, I still do not understand why we're charging a rim fee.
Mr. Mauer?
The RIM fee is intended to offset traffic impacts associated with this industry. It was a mitigation measure identified in EIR. It would be based on the traffic typically generated by the use, and that would be something that the Public Works Department would need to figure out and calculate, and then it would be applied at the issuance of the permit.
So for each grow site, it would then be different. So, or each premise. So if you have multiple premises on 100-acre parcel, what, is it cumulative or is it by each premise?
It's going to be dependent on how much traffic is generated. So for example, a residence, it's a one-time, it's a flat fee based on the residence, regardless of the size of the house. For commercial structures, it's based on the square footage, because the bigger the building, the more traffic is typically generated for commercial uses. In this case, I don't know the exact amount. It hasn't been figured out yet, but it would be based on, if the same amount of traffic is generated, whether it's a half acre or a full acre of cultivation, then it would probably be a flat fee. If it is based on the square footage, you have more traffic because you have more cultivation, you have more crop, then it's going to be based on the area.
I know that some counties are requiring a trip generation form, so they're actually using some type of formula. Is there a state formula regarding generating trips? I've seen emails floating through.
There are trip generation manuals that are typically used for different kinds of businesses. I would be very surprised if cannabis cultivation is in that manual. So it's something we would have to look back at the EIR to determine, the number of trips that were created and apply that with an update to the the TIM fee.
So this would be a formula yet to be determined.
That's correct.
I don't support it. One, we're going to be spending a lot of public works time because each one could be different.
Well, I don't think that's the intent that we're going to be analyzing each one. We would come up with a rate that then is applied. So as we say, it's, a certain amount of dollars per square foot. If you're building a commercial building, it's different. If you've got a industrial building, it would be, this amount for cannabis.
But we're
And
not
is it plugged
talking
into a
about
formula?
a building. because I understand you build a building, but all of a sudden, you know, you have a premise and you have 2 months out of the year, you have 4 workers coming in and out every day for 2 months, just like any other.
It's going to be based on the amount of traffic that's generated.
I hear you, I don't support this.
Okay, so you want us to poll whether to keep this in or take it out, Maria?
Sure, Paul.
Poll, to remove item D, rim fees. Supervisor Mills?
No.
Supervisor Stopper?
No.
Supervisor Toffenali?
No.
Supervisor Garabedian? No.
Ah, why am I not surprised?
All right. Anything on item E, F, G? Yes.
I apologize. Where are we at right now?
We're on-
090?
We're on 070F.
Okay, so, sorry, I jumped up. Okay, I'm here. H.
H?
I would like to just discuss this. It does say later in this chapter when the remediation is due by. When's the remediation due by?
Remediation?
H.
Oh,
Until
H, okay.
remediation per,
130.
yeah.
So this is due before we issue the permit. So if you're transferring from one location to another, before we issue the final permit, we need to verify that that site has been remediated.
So, in the case that, and then there's also a date farther along in here.
Yeah,
So it's either issuance of permit or that date?
right.
And what happens to that certain permit once that date has been passed?
So the date was established by the effectiveness of the ban ordinance, which said that all prior cultivation areas needed to have been cleaned up. And if someone doesn't do that, then they're in violation with that provision. And
In effect, then that would reduce the number from 200 to 199 per se?
well, depends how many haven't cleaned up their site yet.
Right.
And
I
someone
just,
who has walked
I just
away from
think
their
that's a
site-
conversation we need to have, that this could potentially reduce the number and the impact as we move along. Potentially.
Potentially, yes.
All right.
I mean, if someone.
No, I just had that one noted to discuss, but definitely I would like to delve into. That's where,
Do you have a change you want to make on that? Or
Aye.
are you good with it?
I think, the mitigation here is needed and the testing. This is where I would, there's different parts.
Are we on H?
Are you an H?
No, I moved on from H.
Okay,
I'm
so
on
there's
I.
no suggestions on H.
No.
We're on H.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we were on H, and I just wanted to discuss that because it came up later.
070H.
Yeah.
And then I moved on from that discussion
Okay, so now we're on
to I.
All
Has
right.
everybody else moved on?
Is everyone
Everybody
else?
moved on? We're on to 9.
Right.
Excuse me, I.
Aye, okay.
Okay.
This-
Anything else on H?
Nope. Unless somebody else gets something else.
Are we good on H? I don't.
We're good on H. I. Mr. Mauer or Supervisor Stopper, you had a question?
I apologize for the confusion on H and I. Hi. Here, if the applicant is relying on one or more wells as a water source, the commercial cannabis activity, a written report shall be prepared on behalf of the applicant by a state licensed A1 general contractor, C57, well drilling contractor, limited special machinery, pumps, registered environmental health specialist, registered geologist, hydrologist, or professional civil engineer. The report shall estimate the average daily water use of the operation during the months of July through September and demonstrate adequate water utilization. a 24-hour pumping test of the well conducted after a minimum of 8 hours of non-operation of the well pump. The report shall provide an assessment of the well's static water level, production capacity, and recovery rate to demonstrate an adequate supply of water. The well shall recover within 24 hours. Recovery means that the water level is returned to within 90% of the static water level measured prior to the test. This is where I like Mr. Banner to come up, because I'm not saying that they don't have to do a test. The test is needed. But working in the industry.
We got two conversations going.
I'm very sorry.
Mr. Banner. There's the initial test when you drill a well. And that's the elongated test, correct, sir?
The common practice is while the well is being drilled, when they hit the first water, they begin pushing air down there. The air forces water out. The water that's coming in the casing goes out. And that's often referred to as an airlift test. And they do that for the duration of the drilling. The typical duration of drilling one of these wells is 3 days. So the well drillers tell me that they will have this airlift going on for up to 8 hours, pretty typically, and that gives them an idea of the volume of water, the rate of water that's going out of the well. So that's the common practice. It's not regulated by us. That's just standard industry practice.
That's standard practice. My experience with the water industry is that's commonly done, as you explained, even to a more significant level as during the first drill, and that's also to cavitate out so that you aren't pulling up either the sediment, sand, or rocks that are within the perforated part of the casing also.
You're correct. Yeah, they tell me that they do that like overnight. They'll leave a... Right,
yeah, and that's also another test on how many gallons per minute you may get that the well is able to supply. But subsequently...
Do you agree with that? You're kind of hesitant to...
From what I understand, I talked to Fred Brisky and his son, and they've been doing this for up to 60 years now, and I don't know, when they run it overnight, I don't think they're measuring it then, but during this airlift portion while they're drilling, they do measure it then. So they get a pretty good measure of it.
Right, and that's part of the initial drilling, and sorry to confuse that, but you are correct. So you agree with that. So subsequently, there's no well testing after that on other places, but here we're requiring it.
Right.
Right. Well, we do require it within the water industry, but the test is not a 24-hour test. Subsequently, year to year or time to time, it's a shorter test, and this is to determine the static level, because the true test is what the usage is during the season. So at this point, the static level from the beginning to the end of the season is what they're testing on, and there's certain things here that aren't in line with the type of testings we do on, let's say, a water well that supplies a community that's subsequently quite a bit more water than what a single or even 5 acres use on a daily basis. So what they do is because the 24-hour test is going to exacerbate the problem to the aquifer or fractured rock area. Would you concur?
I wouldn't be able to answer that, I'm sorry.
Okay. It's my experience that these tests are done over an hour period on a 15-minute pump cycle, and that's when you turn up the pump to maximum pump, because most of the pumps we deal with are on VFDs, and they pump quite a bit more than 20 or 40 gallons per minute. And so the max of the pump pumps, and then at that point, you do a drawdown test. Well, first you do a static level test. So you know what your static level is at that time. You do a drawdown test, and then as the recharge comes up, you see how long it takes to get back to capacity, and you know whether the well, that's what hydrologists use that we submit to them to use the equation to see how well that well is doing. It's not a 24-hour test.
Correct. I think I would word it a little bit differently, but I know that for a public water system, they do a 72-hour to 10-day test, and they measure the drawdown, start out every half hour, then every hour, then every 4 hours, and it's a really, because that's going to be serving a school or a mobile home park or something like that. The pump, when the person gets a home.
You mean the initial starting of the well? Yes, yes,
so
but it's not the concurrent tests.
But for the person with their home, they rely on that initial well driller's test and the assessment that's put in the well completion report that's sent to the state. When there's, and this is my only familiarity, when there's a turnover of somebody's going to buy a house and they want it tested for that, they use the existing pump that's in there. So they're testing really how fast that pump can pump, because they're not measuring really how fast the water's going in. They're measuring that pump. And they typically do that for 2 to 4 hours. And over the first 2 hours, they'll look at the pump rate, and it will be, say it's 12 gallons per minute. And then as they're pumping those 2 hours, it may go down to 10 and 9 hours. And if it stabilizes at because it's working harder to pull the water out of the formation, if it stabilizes at a certain pump rate, then they're good. If after 2 hours, if it's still heading down, it's still the pump rate's getting lower and lower, they may extend it for another 2 hours. So there are some folks that do it for 1 hour, and some that do it for 2 hours. It's kind of varies in there, and then they'll extend that based on what they're finding. So. And then they do measure the level where it went to the end of the test, and then the recharge. So
right, drawdown, recharge. But that's initially.
Well, that's if somebody wants to buy a house and they want to check and make sure that well is still performing. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Is there other questions or proposal on how we change this? Or don't?
I don't know. I'm assuming all the board got it. I was told we did, but I didn't. I had somebody send it to me. The letter from Dr. Kramer, who's a certified hydrologist with Condor, a company this county's used. And, I mean, part of what he said is the ordinance would be stronger and less vulnerable to challenge if it simply required well performance testing in accordance with state regs in Title 22, Section 64554G. I was told all the board, or that the county was sent this letter yesterday. Mr. Mauer, will you send it? I'm more than happy to send it to you.
I did receive a copy of it.
You did?
Yeah.
Title 22 is what I'm getting to, and the Water Quality Resources Control Board has ultimate say over how those water tests are being done.
So, I don't know, Mr. Mauer, I mean, I'm not supposed to send things to my colleagues because that's a Brown Act violation, but I'm more than happy to send it to them. I didn't get it.
It was an email that was sent to every board member as well as me.
Oh, I got it through a third source because I didn't receive it, but it doesn't matter. As long as my colleagues have it, that's fine.
I didn't receive one from Mr. Kramer. I received one from Danny Shaner.
No, this is from Dr. Kramer.
So Supervisor Callaway, part of the messages from yesterday that I picked up this morning at my desk was from Mr. Kramer asking how to send something electronically. I have not received it yet.
So,
I don't know if that's the
I was
letter.
referring to the other email from Mr. Shaner.
no,
Yeah,
I'm referring to the one from Dr.
No, he has not
Kramer.
sent it yet. It has not been received.
If it's all right with everybody, let's finish up this round of questioning. This is obviously going to take a little bit more time, and we'll go to lunch. We'll probably pick this up after lunch, but I want, Marita, you were on a string.
Well, I guess some of this is, I technically don't understand like Mr. Stopper does. I do see that what Dr. Kramer's saying is different than what is here. And I just feel like my colleagues should see what I'm looking at. And I can send it to Diane and let her.
There's something that was brought up, that you brought up, that was said in that email. Not having seen it, Title 22 is what I was going to get at, to how these things are dealt with by the state, and we should go with state law and stay in accordance with it, and refer to Title 22. That way, as we move forward in the future, if anything changes with the state, because the state is going to change those laws, then we would be fluid with it on the testing, and then
Mr. Kramer works with CCWD and also with the Sigma in the valley, so he's intimately familiar, and that's another piece that needs to be included in here. Many of the counties have a Sigma zone or Sigma area within their basin, and January 2020, we're going to be in it. So that area of West County, the 70 square mile area, we have to find a way to insert something in there to be sure that we protect it from being overpumped by groundwater, and it's very clearly required in the plan that we have to do that. And some of these counties have gone so far as to say no net increase in water use through the implementation. So that Sigma zone is going to be kind of a sensitive area that I think needs a separate discussion from this board.
Okay.
So could I just comment on that,
Yes.
Title 22?
And then we're going to break for lunch. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I've reviewed that section, and what that is the requirement for a public water system to show that it's got sustainable water. And so it says that during the certain period of time, this is for hard rock or fractured rock wells, you'd have that test for 72 hours or 10 days done by hydrologists. So it's a pretty heavy-duty test, and it's expensive. The report is extensive. It's extremely time-consuming, and it's great for a public water system. I guess it's up to you whether you want it for these grows. So I just to clarify that.
I'm not talking about the initial tests. I'm talking about subsequent tests, sir. You know, because the initial tests, these do not pump what a utility system, public utility system pumps from the ground.
That's correct.
So yeah, I think we should sit down and talk about this
We're going
later.
to break for lunch. We're going to pick up exactly at this spot at 1:30. Board members, can you please join us in closed session?
Well, I was going to say, do you want to make it 2, assuming we're half an hour?